Hi, my name is Roman. I'm a system architect here at Valuize, and welcome back to our Valuize Your Gainsight Experience video series, where we take a deep dive into Gainsight features and functionality to help you successfully adopt, implement, and maximize your Gainsight investment. In this second part of the video series about Gainsight structural hierarchies, I'll be walking you through a second set of elements available in Gainsight to organize your workflows and data to provide a great user experience for your team so they can drive optimal value and insight for your business. Last video, we reviewed the C360 and R360 elements and how they interrelated. Today, we will review the CTA and success plan capabilities. So last video, we looked at the C360 and R360. I just wanted to do a quick recap on what we looked at. So this is the C360 and R360. Just to remind you, those are elements of structure you have available in Gainsight to display your business data or your customers' data. In those two elements, you have a custom layout. So you have a specific layout of information displayed to the C360 and R360. You also have a timeline of activities, and you have a cockpit available to see all the call to action in there. I wanted to quickly also remind you how those related in terms of one-to-many relationship. So the company level is the main bucket of information you'll have available to you. Inside of that one bucket, you can have multiple relationship. Again, could be the product or could be something else. In this video, what we're going to look at is the CTAs, the call to action, and the success plan. And again, like the relationship, you can have multiple CTAs in the company level, so the C360, and multiple success plan as well. Likewise, you can also have multiple success plan in R360 and multiple CTAs in R360 as well. And one bucket further, in a success plan, you can have, in some ways, multiple CTAs. They are called objective in success plan, but they're functionally CTAs, and I'm going to show you that in a moment. Now we've done a quick review of what we covered in the last video. In this video, we're going to focus on the CTA and the success plan. Now, in terms of bucket of information size that you have available, the success plan technically is larger than the CTAs, but I'm going to start with the CTA first because there's some elements of the CTA that actually are directly related of how the success plan is structured itself. So let's go with the CTA. So you can access your CTAs from a global view of a cockpit. This is a view that is company agnostic or relationship agnostic and is specific to you as a CSM or an end user. So this is where all my CTAs would be. If I wanted to see a cockpit view that was company specific, I would actually go to the C360 itself. So in this case, I'm using that net app here, and this is the cockpit here. So remember, like the C360 layout, horizontally aligned with a bunch of information here in each of the tabs here. Right now, I'm looking at specifically the cockpit. We covered as well last video the timeline here, which is located here as well. That's a view specific to the company. Same view that is company agnostic is timeline company agnostic. Here, the cockpit company agnostic. So I'm going to go back to the company agnostic view here, and I'll start with creating a CTA. So I'm just going to create it here. And I'm really interested to see what's going to happen with the new Apple AR. So I'm going to use that as an example. And that's a CTA. So call to action, I'm a CSM, I have a customer, I want to talk to them about this new Apple AR feature, example, to see if they are interested in adopting it. And for my company, I'm going to be picking up the one I just had open here, which is NetApp. Here we are. And don't really mind about the relationship. We'll push a date that is due. So that's when the CTA, the call to action, needs to be closed by. And I have different types here. So I'm going to put it as an expansion and maybe an upsell opportunity. And I have a few other elements here available. You could technically add the playbook manually. You can also add playbook automatically. We're going to cover that a little bit later on. I don't want to do it right now because I want to show you what it looks like when there's no playbook assigned to it. So I'm going to click on save on that here. And here we go. So I've got my new Apple AR feature CTA as a call to action. And it's associated to the company itself. If I was to go to the company and go to the cockpit view specifically of the company, I should be able to see the CTA I just created here. So now I see only that CTA. It's a company specific view here. I'll go back to my company agnostic view. And I'm going to open the CTA itself. So as I mentioned earlier on, the CTA is kind of a bucket of information or data you can display information for your end user so they can take action on the information that's provided to them. The first element of information we have is basically CTA very specific, related, when the CTA was created, when the due date of the CTA is, the priority, the type of CTAs you created here. So this is kind of like, we'd call it the metadata of CTAs. Not necessarily the most important aspect of the CTA, but it is information that you might want to have a look at. What's really going to be important is the task. So the task will be elements of information that you want your end user, typically the CSM, to undertake during the life of that CTA. So from the start at the beginning. So you may have multiple tasks. Typically, we recommend that the tasks are things that you want to measure. So, that task has been completed and it's going to be shown as in a report through a measurement, or things you must not forget. Like it's really important. An example that you send a Starbucks card to your customer. That would be something you really want to make sure you don't forget. So typically you use a playbook for that. I didn't apply it right now because I want to show you what the tasks look like when there's no playbook assigned. So I'm going to apply a playbook here. I have a few generic playbook from a demo environment I can use. 1, 2, 3 tasks as example. I'm going to apply those. And here we go. The task could appear here. Now, in Gainsight, tasks are really reminders of things that you need to do. That is a little bit divergent from Salesforce, where tasks are actually where the action happen. Tasks in Gainsight are really reminders. So think of them as reminders. The action itself is located on the timeline. So remember again, in this matrix of data versus elements that you had available, you have the timeline available for the C360, R360. You have the timeline also for the CTA, and you'll see you have a timeline for the success plan as well. And this is where you put all the activities in there. The last bit of information, the CTA itself, and that's particularly important if you're looking at a agnostic view, as the company information here. So in here, you can load any information that is currently located on the company objects of Gainsight. So now let's have a look at how things are managed for the CTA itself. So we looked at what it looks like, but we want to take a further deep dive into what it looks like from an administrative perspective. So in all that, we're gonna start looking at the data management here. So the data management is a view of the database in Gainsight, and I've got a series of objects here, which one of those objects will be the call to action. Now, the call to action is an object that is a bit different than the company or the relationship object. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I'm going to search for the relationship object in Gainsight database here, and you see it's located here. The object type, which is what I want to talk to you about, is currently a standard object, which means that it's a standard object that will automatically come with the Gainsight instance. And that also means you can add fields to it. And the field you add is basically information that you want to be able to display later on, or report on from within Gainsight itself. If I go to the call to action object, you'll see that call to action object is actually a bit different here. You'll see that the object type is actually a system object. So what it means is that when you open it, you cannot actually create fields in this view here in the data management. Rest assured, Gainsight actually provided you a mean to add additional information to the call to action, and that is done into the call to action settings itself in the admin view. So this is where you go to create call to action types, and each type you can create different views for them, and then you can also add custom fields inside of those CTAs here. This is where you actually would do it here. So you could actually add a new custom field, could be anything, Starbucks coffee. So Starbucks coffee card been sent as an example. So you could actually add this field. That would be a Boolean, yes or no. And you could click on save. As you can see, if you scroll down, you can see the Starbucks card Boolean field that I've just added to my CTA. So that's something that we are having available to fill in and manipulate for the CTA itself. Something else which is pretty interesting here is, one thing which is pretty important is to look at the type of layout of information we have available. So we're currently looking at the expansion. That was a CTA we created here. We had the detail. Now, if we had done that expansion CTA at the relationship level, we would have a scene looking at the CTA itself. we'd have seen relationship instead of company. Because the CTA was created at the company level, we're seeing the information from the company level. So here, if I click on this company tab, this is opening the company object, and essentially inside of the company object, all the data information. And remember, the company object is a standard object, which means in the data management, you can add fields and then load information to those fields. That information becomes available to load it inside of the CTA layout. So as an example, if it was really important for me to know who the CEO of that company, then each time I create a CTA type, I'll be able to see the CEO from the CTA view specifically. Another thing which is really neat is that you can also add custom object tabs to your CTAs. That's pretty powerful in such a way that you can actually have a CTA that is very specific to a use case. So as an example, if you had a professional services function that you want to capture inside of Gainsight, you could actually have all the information from professional services, custom object inside of Gainsight, loaded into a professional services CTA and have all that information. And we've done that as an example here. One of the CTA tab we have is professional services, and we're loading it a professional services object here. And if I go to it in the layout configuration, you'll see that there's an extra one tab here, which is the professional services tab. And there's a bunch of information and data that is available there for you to use. So if you have your technical account management team that is using Gainsight, this is something you could provide them that is unique to their needs. My colleague James did a great video how to set up the custom object and the CTA layout. So I really encourage you to have a look at that video. Okay, now we covered how the call to action is structured and what type of information you can display in there and how to display it. Something else I wanted to point out, and I want to show you that in the data management. So in data management, I can see all my call to action. I can see also the data, so the CTA that are being created. So I have a bunch of CTAs here, a bunch of tests here. Quick thing to note is if you want to search a CTA, you know, Gainsight is forcing you to do a JSID search. Most people won't know or won't remember the JSID of a CTA. You can change that to the name by adding a filter. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to change search for the name of the CTA, because I remember there's something to do with Apple, and then actually contains Apple here. Save. And this is the CTA I was talking about. So one thing I want to show, and this is why I'm going to be jumping to success plan now, is in a CTA itself, you also have success plan information and objective category. So like I said, in success plan, you have objectives in there. They're not called CTAs, they're called objective. Those objective information, that objective information is also loaded on the call to action object. So something to be mindful of. Okay, so let's move on to the success plan now. The success plan is also another way of displaying or loading information in what I like to call it buckets of information. And you have a lot to work with. Success plan are really, really interesting to use if you plan to share the information with somebody. It could be somebody external to Gainsight environment, or with a colleague that doesn't have a Gainsight license, for example. And there's some really neat things you can do because of that. So I'm going to create my success plan here, and I'm going to call it Apple AR onboarding as example. The type will be, I'll just create a new success plan here. And the due date will be something in the future, and save that. I'm not going to load anything in advance. This is what the success plan would look like. So you'd have description and highlights. This is where you probably want to add information about the value-based outcome you want to achieve with that success plan. This is where the information will be. Now the success plan, like the R360 and the C360 and the CTAs, they have the objective, which is essentially a list of tasks. Now those objectives are call to action technically. So inside, you actually create a new CTA. I click on that, and this is where I could actually say like show Apple AR. So that would be a CTA here, but in the success plan, it's actually called an objective. So the type, you can't choose the type to different types. This is an objective, a CTA type. So click on that to save it. This is where it's going to be like show AR. Now let me go back to the data management. And if I refresh that view, now I should see a new one, which is show Apple AR, and you have a success plan GSID attached to it, and the objective category is an objective. So that's the GSID for it. Same one there. I've done a test beforehand. Okay, so let's go back here. So one thing that is really, really neat with the success plan is you have a Gantt chart. And so the Gantt chart is actually showing you all your CTAs here and a visual representation of when they start and when they're supposed to be ended. What is really neat is you can actually manually change that to something else. So you can change it here and then move it this way if I grab it properly. So I could say like, okay, that CTA is supposed to start on the 5th and will end on the 19th as an example. So you can do that live and it's going to update all that information in the back of the system. Something else that is really, really neat, like I mentioned, is you can actually share that information. So you can share it with anybody that, is a user. So I can go to my name and this will be me. And basically I can choose what type of information I want to display there. So if I was to send it to me, preview, this is what it looks like. And that's going to be, then it's going to provide me a link on my email to open, and I'll be able to see that success plan and comment on it. So this is where if you use that function, you have a great level of collaboration with somebody else in your team to work on. So I've sent it there. And in terms of collaboration, what is really neat is you can actually add comment and make add symbols. So, as an example, if I wanted to make a comment to my colleague James, I would just do it that way, and then James, check that out. And so James will actually see that comment and be able to comment himself. So you can have a list of information of exchanges inside of the success plan itself. I can send that. Okay, so that's good. And then go to the timeline here. The timeline, like the timeline in the C360, R360 in the CTAs, this is where we'd have your activity loaded. So I could just put an activity and a date as an example, and I could say I've reached out to the customer. And I have to put the subject. And so now I have an activity in my success plan itself. So just a quick recap. So we looked at the C360 R360. That was last video. Today we looked at the CTAs and the success plan. In many ways you can use CTAs to build success plan with because you have that custom object available to you. However, if you want to share and add comments and collaborate with other team members, success plan is a great tool to use for that. However, you have to also understand that success plan are a little bit heavier in terms of maintenance from an admin perspective. So it's a bit of a balance, right? You have extra functionality that's a little bit more maintenance intensive. CTAs are the lowest maintenance intensive level of hierarchy you have available in Gainsight. So strongly encourage to use them as much as possible and out of the box as much as possible as well. Gainsight offers a great degree of flexibility in how to structure your data for consumption. So far, we have focused on the C360, R360, Success Plan, and CTAs. Gainsight provides several key structural hierarchies to utilize to organize your data and provide a great user experience to your team so they can drive optimal value and insight for your business. If you have any questions about this feature or want to learn more, check out our resources section of the Valuize website or contact our team of customer lifecycle and Gainsight experts. Keep an eye out for our next video and stay tuned.